Have you ever stood alone at night, just before sleep, and felt as though something deep inside you stirred? Something unexplainable, ancient, and quiet? Not a voice, exactly. More like a murmur from the hidden layers of yourself. A flicker behind the eyes, whispering, "You are not who you think you are." We like to believe we're rational creatures, don't we? That our choices are the product of careful thought, of measured steps, of clarity. We like to imagine that we're in control, steering the wheel of our own story. But if you look closely, closer than comfort allows, you'll find that beneath that polished surface lies something else. A tangled web of instincts, fears, longings, shadows, unwritten rules, silent compulsions, invisible laws, operating in the background of your every move. You feel them sometimes. When you say something and immediately regret it, when your chest tightens with envy and you smile anyway, when you chase after something not because you need it, but because someone else has it, when your anger flares before your mind catches up, when you hurt someone you love, not out of cruelty, but out of an old familiar reflex. We walk through life in costumes we don't even know we're wearing. And every so often, when the night is quiet and your defenses are down, you catch a glimpse, a shiver, a flicker, a truth. So let me ask you, do you really know yourself? Not the version you present to others, not the curated thoughts or the socially acceptable reactions. I mean the raw, unfiltered you, the one who dreams, who hides, who aches, the one who learned how to survive a long time ago and never stopped adapting. The 18 laws you're about to hear, they are not judgments. They are not meant to label you or shame you. They are here like a mirror, fogged at first, but gradually clearing. They exist so that you might stop, just for a moment, and look at yourself. Not with fear, not with guilt, but with honesty. Because the moment you see clearly, that's when something shifts. That's when real choice begins. And maybe, just maybe, that's when freedom begins too. So step gently through this door. Not into philosophy as an abstract idea, but into the trembling truth of what it means to be human. These are the laws of emotion, behavior, perception, and identity. They are ancient, they are silent, but they are always, always there, waiting. Now breathe slowly. The night is long and we have much to see. It begins quietly. You're scrolling through your phone late at night, your room dim, the world hushed. And then, there it is. A photo, a post, a story. Someone smiling, someone succeeding, someone announcing something bright and beautiful. They're not doing anything to you, not directly, but something stirs. A pinch in your chest, a tightness in your throat, a faint sense of shrinking. You tell yourself it's nothing, that you're happy for them, that it's just a fleeting feeling. But if you linger there, just for a few seconds longer, you'll feel its presence, that shadow slipping through the cracks. Envy. We're taught that envy is ugly, something to be hidden, controlled, maybe even shamed. But what if we looked at it differently, not as a flaw, but as a signal? A quiet cry from within that says, there's something I long for, something I believe I cannot have. Envy doesn't always come with fire. Often, it arrives like fog. Soft, dense, creeping into the corners of your thoughts. It follows you into friendships, into love, into the quiet corners of ambition. You watch someone you admire, maybe even someone you love, doing something you've only dared to dream. And instead of inspiration, there's ache. We imagine that we are above envy, that if we're wise enough, grounded enough, it won't touch us. But the truth is, envy is stitched into the very fabric of what it means to be human. It's ancient, evolutionary, a part of the primal mechanism that once helped us survive. To see what others had, food, safety, status, and want it too. Even children feel it before they know its name. The baby who cries when another child is held. The toddler who clutches a toy tighter when someone else reaches for it. And we don't grow out of it. We just learn to wear better masks. But beneath the mask, envy often tells a story. It reveals what you value, even if you've buried that value so deep you forgot it was yours. When you envy someone's success, it may be your own fear of failure speaking. When you envy their freedom, perhaps it's the echo of your own quiet longing to escape. When you envy someone's beauty, their confidence, their love, it's not because you are cruel. It's because something inside you still dreams of being chosen, seen, held. It is not the feeling itself that harms. It is our silence around it, our denial, our guilt, and that silence turns envy into something venomous. Left unspoken, it festers. It shapes how we speak about others, how we withdraw, how we perform kindness while secretly hoping they'll stumble, just a little, so we can breathe again. But what if we didn't hide it? What if, in a gentle moment of honesty, you could admit, yes, I feel this, I don't want to, but I do. There's a kind of softness in that truth, a releasing of the pressure to always be above it all. You see, the goal is not to never feel envy. The goal is to understand it when it comes, to trace its thread gently back to the place where you feel you are lacking. And here's the secret envy rarely reveals. It's almost never about the other person. Not really. It's about you, about the part of you that feels unseen, unmet, unsatisfied. It's a signal flare from the soul asking, why not me? And beneath that, am I enough? There is courage in turning toward that question, even when it hurts. There is tenderness in holding your own hunger with compassion rather than shame. Sometimes, envy is not a sign that you are small, but that you are still reaching, that you still believe, somewhere deep inside, that you are meant for more. You don't have to punish yourself for feeling envy. You only have to notice it, breathe with it, ask what it's trying to show you. And maybe, if you follow it not with judgment, but with curiosity, that it can lead you back to something you forgot you were allowed to want. Envy will visit again. That is its law. It does not vanish with age or wisdom. But when it does, you can greet it like an old traveler. You can listen. You can learn. You can let it pass through like wind through an open window instead of closing the shutters in fear. Because here, in the quiet honesty of night, we are not perfect. We are not immune. We are beautifully flawed and achingly alive. And envy, like all shadows, only asks to be seen in the light. So if you felt it today, this week, this life, know that you are not alone. And know that it's okay. You are still kind. You are still whole. You are still good. You are human. And the journey continues. Sometimes, when the world is still and you're alone with your thoughts, you might feel it. The faint sense that you are wearing a costume, that you've worn it for so long, so convincingly, you're not even sure what's underneath anymore. We learn early that life is a stage, that the world rewards certain performances, the polite child, the responsible sibling, the good student, the agreeable friend. And we wear these roles like second skins, not out of deception, but survival, to be accepted, to be safe, to belong. At first, it seems harmless, almost innocent. You smile when you're supposed to. You nod when expected. You say the right thing, even when your chest tightens with disagreement. And somewhere along the way, you begin to forget where the performance ends and where you begin. Have you ever been at a dinner, a party, a job, surrounded by people who laugh, talk praise, and yet inside you feel like an actor who's forgotten their lines? There is a dissonance that hums beneath the surface, a quiet ache that whispers, "This isn't me." But it's hard to stop, because every time you try to pull off the mask, there's a fear. What if they don't like the face beneath it? What if they leave? What if the role is the only thing they ever truly loved? So you stay in character. The role of the strong one who never cries. The role of the smart one who always has the answers. The role of the funny one who hides pain in punchlines. Or the peaceful one who swallows rage just to keep the room from burning. We become fluent in the language of performance, forgetting that silence was once our mother tongue. But the soul is patient. It waits beneath the roles. Quiet, still, wounded, but waiting. And sometimes in dreams or long drives or the middle of the night, it reaches up and tugs at the costume, whispering, "Remember me?" And maybe you do remember. That version of you who didn't care about impressing, who wasn't trying to fit or win or charm. The you who laughed too loud or cried too easily or danced without music, the unguarded one, the real one. The truth is, everyone is performing, even the ones who seem most effortless, even the ones you envy. Beneath every mask is a person who, at some point, learned that their full self was too much or not enough, or simply not welcome. So they adjusted, adapted, survived. But survival is not the same as living, and the longer we stay in roles, the heavier they become. Not just emotionally, but spiritually. They dim our inner light, they dull the edges of our joy, and slowly, gently, they erase us. So what happens when we start peeling back the layers? It won't be dramatic, like in the movies. There may not be a grand unveiling. Sometimes it begins simply, like saying no when you're expected to say yes, like letting your voice tremble instead of forcing a smile, like laughing in the wrong moment, crying in the right one, walking away when you're supposed to stay. And at first, it's terrifying. You'll feel exposed, vulnerable, raw. But slowly, the people who only loved the performance will fade. And the ones who remain, the ones who say, I see you, not your act, you. Those people are the ones worth keeping close. And most importantly, you will see yourself again. Not the idealized version, not the perfectly curated character, but the you who feels things deeply, who gets it wrong and tries again. The you who longs to be understood, not applauded. The law of role-playing is simple and yet relentless. The longer you play a role, the more you risk forgetting who you truly are. And though roles can protect you, they can also imprison you. But the door is always open. You can step off the stage. You can write a new script, one that's quieter perhaps, less polished but more honest. And maybe, just maybe, someone in the audience will breathe a sigh of relief and whisper, "Me too." So if tonight you feel the weight of the role you've been playing, if you're tired of performing, of pretending, of pleasing, know that you're not alone. Many of us are walking off stage in search of ourselves. And maybe that's what healing truly is. Not becoming someone new, but remembering who we were before the world told us to be someone else. In the stillness, you can hear it. The soft rustle of a mask being set down. The quiet exhale of a soul finally being allowed to speak. You are not a role. You are not a performance. You are real. And you are allowed to come home to yourself. There is something peculiar about the way we look at life. We see only what's right in front of us, what hurts now, what we want now, what we fear now. It's as if the present moment has a kind of gravity that pulls all of our attention into it, distorting time, making the future feel like a foggy, unreachable land. And the past, a fading echo we barely believe we lived. We make decisions like travelers lost in a forest with only a candle for light. The flicker shows us the nearest trees, the stones we might trip on, the rustling in the bushes, but never the shape of the forest, never the mountains in the distance, or the cliffs just beyond. And so we choose what soothes the present ache. We reach for what glitters because it shines now. We run from discomfort because it stings now. We make promises for tomorrow that we don't know how to keep, all because today is loud, demanding, immediate. You felt it too, haven't you? That rush to fix, to act, to respond, without really seeing where the road leads. We eat our anger instead of speaking our truth, just to keep the peace. We spend to feel powerful, love to feel needed, say yes to feel wanted. Not because it serves the long path, but because it calms the current storm. It's not weakness, it's being human. The now is intoxicating. It hums with urgency. And in that hum, we forget. We forget that short-term comfort often grows long-term pain. That easy today can mean heavy tomorrow. That what feels safe in the moment may be quietly building walls around us. Have you ever looked back at a version of yourself, 5 years ago, 10, and felt a kind of tenderness mixed with sorrow? Not because you were foolish, but because you didn't know what you couldn't yet see. You were doing your best with the vision you had, but your eyes were still learning how to stretch past the moment. And that's the thing. We rarely pause to ask, what does this look like in a year? In 5? In the final pages of my life, will this choice still feel right? We're rarely taught to think like that. In a world that moves faster every day, that rewards reaction over reflection, foresight is a lost art. But what if we reclaimed it? Not in some perfect strategic way, but gently, quietly, with intention. What if before answering, before acting, before buying, before loving, we asked ourselves, what future am I building right now in this small choice? Because every decision, however small, shapes a direction. And over time, direction becomes destiny. Of course, we can't see everything. Life is unpredictable. The long view is never clear. But that doesn't mean we're blind. It just means we must learn to see with something deeper than sight, with wisdom, with imagination, with memory. Memory, especially, is a powerful teacher. The pain we once ignored that grew into heartbreak. The small discipline we practiced that bloomed into something beautiful. These are maps if we choose to trace them. And imagination? That is the lantern we carry into the fog. To picture the future not as fantasy, but as consequence, soft or sharp, blooming or bruised. Not to fear it, but but to feel responsible for it. You see, short-sightedness is not just about bad planning. It's about forgetting that time has weight, that tomorrow is not a myth, that the person you'll become will one day look back and thank you or beg you to have chosen differently. And sometimes, the cost of a short-sighted life isn't even felt by us. It's felt by the people we love, the ones who inherit our habits, our patterns, our debts, our silence. Short-sightedness ripples through generations. It isn't always loud. Often, it comes in the form of regret whispered too late. But none of this is meant to shame. If anything, it's an invitation to slow down, to widen the lens, to lift your eyes from the candle's glow and ask, where am I really going? There's grace in realizing you've been walking in circles. There's power in turning around. And there's freedom in no longer needing the moment to feel good if it means the future might feel whole. So tonight, if your heart is torn between what feels good now and what you know might serve you later, I hope you pause. I hope you listen not just to the noise of the present, but to the quiet voice of the future calling you forward. That voice, so soft, so easily drowned out, is still yours. And it is wise. The law of short-sightedness doesn't mean we're doomed to live in the blur of now. It only reminds us that clarity takes effort. That vision requires trust, that the best parts of life, peace, depth, meaning, are often slow to grow. But they are worth the wait. Look beyond the flicker, listen past the noise, and trust that you can choose not only for this moment, but for the soul you are still becoming. The road is longer than you think, but you are not lost. You are learning to see. There's a fire that lives inside all of us. We may not talk about it. We may hide it beneath smiles and kind words and calm gestures. But it's there, an ancient spark that flickers behind the eyes, especially when we feel threatened, cornered, unseen. A tightening in the jaw. A breath that catches a little too sharply. A pulse that races without warning. We often think of aggression as something wild, primitive, something that belongs only to war zones or dark alleyways. But it isn't always loud. In truth, it wears many costumes. It might show up in a cold silence, in a cutting word, in a passive act that wounds by omission rather than force. And sometimes it wears the most deceptive mask of all, righteousness. To be human is to have been built for survival. And survival, for much of our history, meant fighting. Fighting for food, for territory, for safety, for love. That fight didn't leave us. It just moved inward, into our voices, our relationships, our institutions. We sharpened it, refined it, made it more socially acceptable. But the energy behind it, the drive, remains raw. You've felt it, haven't you? The sudden jolt of anger when someone cuts in front of you. The way your body tenses when someone questions your worth. The imaginary arguments you replay in your mind long after the room has gone quiet. That's not weakness. That's the fire whispering. It says, you are not safe. You are not seen. You must fight to be heard. But here's the truth no one tells us. Aggression isn't always about others. Often it begins as a quiet war within ourselves. There are moments, small, almost invisible, when we feel we've lost control, when life doesn't bend to our plans, when someone challenges our carefully constructed self-image. In those moments, we don't just react to what's outside. We react to a deeper feeling, helplessness. And aggression becomes the armor we reach for. Some of us direct it outward, building walls, raising our voices, trying to overpower. Others turn it inward, swallowing our rage until it becomes shame, depression, self-harm. Both are wounds of the same fire. Both speak to something unspoken inside us. I don't know how to hold this pain, so I will turn it into heat. But not all fire is destruction. Sometimes it's signal. Sometimes it's the body's way of saying, something in me needs protection. Something in me feels unseen. The question is not whether aggression exists, but what we choose to do with it, whether we let it rule us or let it reveal us. You see, the law of aggression is not just about violence. It's about our threshold. How much disappointment can we hold before snapping? How much difference can we tolerate before attacking? How much fear can we sit with before projecting it onto others? Society rewards control. We are praised for our calmness, our composure, our ability to stay cool under pressure. But beneath that surface, many of us carry generations of unexpressed fury. Some of it ours, some inherited. The rage of being unheard, of being denied, of being told to be nice when everything inside us was screaming. So we learn to disguise it. We fold our aggression into ambition, into criticism, into sarcasm, into perfectionism. We call it drive. We call it standards. But sometimes it's just pain that didn't know where else to go. And then there are the moments when it spills out, when the pressure inside is too much, when a single word, too sharp, too casual, makes everything crack open. We say things we don't mean. We hurt the people we love. And afterward, we feel ashamed, confused, maybe even afraid of ourselves. We ask, where did that come from? It came from the fire. Not because you are broken, but because you are human. The truth is, aggression isn't evil, it's energy. What matters is how we use it, whether we learn to listen to it, to work with it, or whether we let it burn everything in its path. And that choice often begins with softness, not strength, with the courage to admit when we're scared, when we feel powerless, when the little child inside us is still trying to be heard. Late at night, when the world is quiet and no one's watching, you might feel it rise. A heat in the chest, a clench in the teeth, a restlessness under the skin. If you do, try not to run. Sit with it. Let it speak. Ask it, what are you protecting? What hurt are you carrying? Sometimes aggression is just grief in armor. Sometimes it's love that didn't know how to be held. And sometimes it's a part of you that's been screaming for years, asking someone, anyone, to understand. You don't have to destroy to be strong. You don't have to lash out to reclaim your power. And you don't have to pretend to be peaceful if you are still boiling inside. Real peace isn't the absence of fire. It's learning how to hold the flame without letting it consume you. So the next time you feel it, when your voice rises or your fists clench or your silence turns sharp, I hope you remember this. You are not wrong for feeling it. You are only being asked to listen more deeply to the part of you that still burns, not because it wants war, but because it longs for healing. The law of aggression is not a verdict. It's a mirror. It shows us where the fire lives and asks us if we're ready to stop hiding from its heat. You are not too much. You are just learning how to carry your flame without setting the world on fire. And that, too, is a kind of freedom. Have you ever wanted something so deeply it ached? Not out of necessity, not out of survival, but simply because it shimmered just beyond your reach. A look, a life, a feeling. Something someone else had, or something you imagined would make everything inside you finally quiet down. Desire is a soft thing at first. It whispers gently, it points toward the beautiful, the possible. It inspires, even uplifts. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, it can grow claws. There is something deeply human, achingly human, about longing for what is not ours. It's almost as if we are wired to see the value in what's just outside the borders of our possession. The greener grass, the warmer hand, the more peaceful life. We can be surrounded by comfort, abundance, even love, and still feel an emptiness curling somewhere deep inside. An itch that says, not yet, not enough, not this. It begins early. Watch a child playing. When they see another child holding a toy, suddenly that toy becomes the only thing worth wanting. Not because it's better, but because it's not theirs. That's the beginning of the law at work. Not in malice, but in the innocent yearning of a heart that is still learning what it means to belong. And as we grow, the objects of our longing shift, but the shape of the feeling stays the same. We look at someone else's life, glimpsed through the filtered lens of a screen or the careful polish of social gatherings, and we imagine they hold the missing piece. If only we had their confidence, their ease, their partner, their path. We fill the empty space in our chest with stories about how different, how whole, how complete we'd feel. If only. But covetousness is never truly about the thing. It's about the hunger, the gnawing sensation that who we are or what we have isn't quite enough. And so we chase endlessly. We call it ambition, drive, even passion. And sometimes it is. But sometimes it's just a slow erosion of presence, a drifting away from the life that is already ours. We scroll, we compare, we want, over and over again. And in that cycle, something quiet and sacred begins to fade, the ability to be content. It's not that wanting is wrong, far from it. Wanting can be a compass. It can tell us what we care about. It can wake us up from apathy. But when the wanting becomes constant, when it takes root in the center of our being, it blinds us. We stop seeing what is here. We stop feeling grateful. And we start measuring life not by what fills us, but by what we lack. It's a kind of spiritual poverty, a hunger that no feast can satisfy. And yet it is so tender, so painfully understandable. Because behind covetousness is often a deeper ache, the longing to be seen, to be held, to feel like we matter. When we crave the admiration someone else receives, it's often because we're unsure of our own worth. When we envy someone's joy, it might be because we've forgotten how to feel joy in our own skin. The things we covet are rarely about the things themselves. They are symbols, placeholders for an unspoken need inside us. But the law is tricky. It doesn't just live in obvious places. Sometimes it wears the face of love. We meet someone, and we don't just love them. We want to possess them, to fold their life into ours, to own their affection. And when they pull away or choose another, the ache turns into fire. We want them more, not because of who they are, but because they've become the embodiment of everything we feel we've been denied. Other times it sneaks into the mirror. We covet a version of ourselves that doesn't exist, a thinner self, a more successful self, a less broken self. And the person we are now begins to feel like a failure simply for being unfinished. But here's the truth that doesn't arrive easily. Covetousness is a shadow of our disconnection from the present, from the fullness of this moment, from the messy, imperfect, breathing life we are already inside. There is no freedom in the chase, only exhaustion. And yet, it's hard to let go, because letting go feels like defeat. It feels like saying this is enough, when every voice around us screams more. But there's a quiet rebellion in choosing to stay, to look around, to soften into what we have, even if it's small, even if it's lonely, even if it's not what we imagined. Sometimes the cure for covetousness is not discipline or shame or denial. Sometimes it's simply attention, a long, slow gaze at the things we've overlooked because they've always been there. The friend who listens, the warm meal, the breath that continues without being asked, the moonlight that drips silently through the curtains while we lie awake, wanting something we can't quite name. You don't need to stop wanting, but you can learn to hold your wanting with tenderness instead of urgency. You can learn to say, yes, I see that. Yes, it's beautiful. And still, I am here. Desire will come and go. It will pull your eyes toward the horizon again and again. But if you keep chasing the horizon, you will never arrive. Sometimes it's enough to sit where you are, let the wind blow through your fingers, and whisper to the sky, I am grateful for this longing, even if it never finds its end. Because even longing can be holy if we stop trying to silence it and simply listen. And maybe that's what the law wants to teach us. Not to eliminate desire, but to understand it, to stop confusing it with truth, to stop letting it dictate our worth. You are not broken because you want. You are not wrong because you yearn. You are simply human, searching for light in a world full of glittering distractions. And sometimes the real light is the one you've already been standing in all along. There is a mirror we all carry, though few of us ever see it. It doesn't hang on our walls or shimmer under bathroom lights. It floats somewhere just behind our eyes, a quiet, invisible pane that reflects everything back to us, but filtered, always, through the image of ourselves. We don't mean to center the world around us. It's not arrogance, not always. It's just that we've only ever seen through these eyes, felt with this skin, thought with this mind. So everything, joy, pain, love, rejection, even silence, passes first through the question, what does this say about me? That's where the law begins, not in vanity or malice, but in the fragile architecture of selfhood. The way a child cries not because the world is ending, but because their own world is. The way we mistake being overlooked for being unloved. The way we crave acknowledgement, not for attention's sake, but because without it, we sometimes feel like we don't quite exist. This isn't about narcissism as a diagnosis. This is about the ordinary, aching human tendency to make ourselves the center of every story, even when we don't want to be. It happens in the smallest ways. A friend doesn't reply, and we wonder what we did wrong. A partner grows distant, and we spiral into self-blame or suspicion. We walk into a room and think everyone is watching, judging, measuring, but more often than not, they're not. They're too busy listening to the same echoing voice in their own minds, wondering what you are thinking of them. It's strange, isn't it? How deeply we long to be seen, and how easily we convince ourselves we already are, always under a magnifying glass. It creates a kind of distortion, a quiet paranoia. We interpret, project, defend, all because we assume others are seeing us with the same intensity that we see ourselves. But they're not. And maybe neither should we. Because at the heart of this law is something tender, something raw. We're trying to prove that we matter. We want our suffering to be visible, our joy to be witnessed, our stories to be heard not just in passing, but with reverence. And when that doesn't happen, when the world moves on without pausing to reflect us back, something inside tightens. That's when the mirror starts to blur. We speak louder or retreat entirely. We curate our images, our words, our presence, trying to manage how we appear. We become actors in our own lives, endlessly tweaking the script. And it's exhausting. What we don't realize is that the more we focus on the self, the more we suffer. Not because self-awareness is wrong, but because self-preoccupation is a kind of prison. It traps us in endless cycles of comparison, validation-seeking, insecurity, and control. We become obsessed with how we are perceived, forgetting how to be. Have you ever watched someone truly at peace? They don't shrink or puff up. They don't fill silence with their voice. They're simply there, listening, present, soft. That kind of presence is rare. Because most of us are busy adjusting our masks, not because we're fake, but because we're scared. Scared of being ordinary. Scared of being forgotten. Scared that, if we stop performing, the world might stop noticing. But here's the secret. The more you release the need to be seen, the more you begin to see. You notice the way sunlight pools in the corners of your room, the way someone's eyes shimmer when they talk about what they love, the quiet sadness in a friend's voice, the unnoticed kindness in a stranger's gesture. Life begins to unfold around you, not as a reflection of yourself, but as a living, breathing, sacred thing in its own right. And slowly, you begin to soften. The mirror fades. The need to be important, special, admired, it loosens its grip. You realize you don't have to prove anything, that you can just be. But of course, that's not always easy. The law pulls us back. We fall into loops of self-focus again and again, especially when we're hurt. When we feel rejected or unseen, the self rushes forward like a shield. Why don't they love me? Why don't they understand? Why can't they see how much I'm trying? And those questions, they're not wrong. They come from a real place. But they're also a call to return to the present, to step outside the loop, to remember that the world isn't watching as closely as you think. And that's not a tragedy. It's a freedom. Because when no one is watching, you can finally rest. You can cry without curating your tears, laugh without wondering if it's too loud, fail without narrating it in your head like a scene. You can love not because it makes you feel seen, but because it makes someone else feel safe. There's a kind of peace that only arrives when we let go of ourselves, not to erase who we are, but to open the door to who we're not yet becoming. So maybe the law of narcissism isn't a condemnation. Maybe it's just a gentle reminder of how easily we drift inward and how necessary it is sometimes to look out, not to be selfless in some grand moral way, but to be curious about others, curious about the world, curious about what it feels like to exist without constantly narrating it. And when we do that, when we forget ourselves just long enough to touch the edges of someone else's life, we find something strange and beautiful, our own selves, mirrored not in isolation, but in connection. Not a performance, not a brand, just a person, quiet, warm, real. Maybe that's enough. There's a comforting story we like to tell ourselves, that we are logical creatures, rational beings navigating life with clarity and reason. We think our decisions are made from careful thought, that our judgments come from truth, and that our beliefs are earned through insight. But under the soft surface of that story lies something older, something far more primal. Most of what we do isn't logical at all, and maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe that's just being human. The truth is, we feel first, and only later do we explain. We act, and then we justify. Something stirs within us, a pull, a gut reaction, a flicker of fear or desire, and our mind rushes in afterward with tidy little narratives. We don't build our lives on reason. We decorate our emotions with it. Think about it. How many choices have you made because they felt right, not because they were? How many times have you convinced yourself of something, only to realize, much later, that it was never about facts, but about feelings you couldn't quite name? We fall in love with someone, not because they make sense, but because something in us aches for them. We stay in places that hurt us because the thought of change terrifies us more than the pain we already know. We avoid certain truths, not because we doubt them, but because facing them would shatter something we've spent years trying to hold together. And when others make choices we don't understand, we call them irrational. We forget they, too, are pulled by unseen threads, the old wounds, the childhood fears, the longing to be safe, to be known, to be right. We assume they should think like us. But how could they? Our minds aren't blank slates. They're stained glass windows, colored by memory, shaped by time. Light comes through, but never clearly. And so we argue. Not over facts, but over frames. We shout past each other, each convinced the other is blind. But blindness isn't the exception, it's the rule. The tragedy is that we rarely know where our own sight ends. Irrationality doesn't live in wild behavior or extreme emotion. It lives in the quiet distortions, those tiny ways we bend reality to fit what we want it to believe. It lives in denial, in defensiveness, in the comforting fictions we whisper to ourselves when the truth is too sharp. It lives in the stories we tell to survive. We say, "I'm fine," when we're breaking. We say, "It doesn't matter," when it matters more than anything. We blame others because blaming ourselves would hurt too much. We hold on to anger because letting go would mean feeling grief. And the strangest part? We don't even know we're doing it. We scroll through news that confirms what we already believe. We surround ourselves with voices that echo our own. We dismiss the unfamiliar, not because it's wrong, but because it threatens the fragile little world we've built inside. It's not stupidity. It's not weakness. It's just human. Because the mind doesn't want the truth. It wants comfort. It wants certainty. And it will twist itself in knots to get it. But beneath all this, there's a quiet beauty. Because once we see it, really see it, we begin to soften. We stop expecting ourselves to be perfect machines of logic. We stop punishing ourselves for every fear, every doubt, every emotional leap that doesn't make sense on paper. We begin to accept that irrationality isn't a bug in the system. It is the system. And then something remarkable happens. We become more gentle with others and with ourselves. We start to listen not just to words, but to what lies beneath them. We notice when someone's anger is actually hurt, when their silence is actually fear, when their certainty is actually fragility wearing armor. And maybe we start to ask better questions. Not just what do I believe, but why do I need to believe this? Not just what did they do, but what might they be feeling? Not just am I right, but is this helping anyone heal? These are not the questions of logic. These are the questions of wisdom. Because while we may never fully escape our irrationality, we can learn to recognize its shape. We can feel when something inside us tightens, when our reactions outpace our understanding, when our fear dresses up as righteousness. And in those moments, we can pause, just for a breath, just long enough to choose something softer. That pause, that little space between feeling and action, is where our freedom lives. Not in becoming perfectly rational, but in learning to live gracefully within our messiness, in learning to forgive ourselves when we falter, in learning to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. The law of irrationality isn't here to condemn you. It's here to remind you that you are not a robot, not a machine. You are a storm of memories, instincts, dreams, and contradictions. You are allowed to not make sense. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to feel one thing and do another, and to not always know why. And maybe late at night, when the noise of the world has quieted, you'll sit with that truth, not as a flaw, but as a kind of sacred humanity. We are not rational creatures, but we are beautiful anyway. There's a strange kind of silence that lives in our daily rituals. You wake up, reach for your phone before your eyes even open. You scroll through familiar screens, sip the same coffee, walk the same path to work or to nowhere, breathe in the same sighs, replay the same conversations in your head. The faces change, the hours pass, but something deeper, unchanging, pulls you along. We like to think we are choosing our lives, that each step we take is deliberate, each word a decision. But if we look a little closer, we might see the quiet machinery behind the curtain, the invisible habits that shape us more than our intentions do. The reflexes we've repeated for so long, they've carved tunnels through our minds. And what begins as comfort slowly becomes compulsion. We don't mean to keep checking, rechecking, scrolling, snapping, consuming, avoiding, reacting. We just do. And we keep doing, not because it brings joy, but because not doing it makes something inside us uneasy. It's as if our bodies remember something our minds have forgotten, a rhythm we no longer question, even if it leads us nowhere. Sometimes it's obvious, like the way we reach for distractions when loneliness creeps in, or the way we lash out when we feel vulnerable, and that because anger is easier than pain. Sometimes it's quieter, like the subtle ways we sabotage things when they get too good, too close, too real, or the patterns we repeat in love, again and again, even when we swear we've learned. It's like being stuck in a dream you can't quite wake from. You know the ending. You've been here before. But somehow, your feet keep moving forward, as if your past has momentum, as if your shadow is leading. These compulsions aren't always dramatic. Often they're ordinary, mundane. But that's what makes them powerful. They become invisible, a way of being, a lens through which we see the world and ourselves. You might call it routine. Others might call it personality. But deep down, you know when something isn't a choice anymore. You feel it in the restlessness when you try to stop, in the tension beneath the surface, in the way your chest tightens at the thought of breaking the pattern. There's no need to judge it. We all have our loops, the things we return to when we're tired, scared, overwhelmed. Little rituals that once served us, protected us, maybe even saved us. But over time, what once helped us cope starts to confine us. And the hardest part is that most of this happens beneath awareness. You might tell yourself, I just prefer things this way, or this is who I am, and maybe partly that's true. But if you dig deeper, if you sit in the silence long enough, you might hear a different voice, one that whispers, you're afraid to let go, afraid that if you stopped moving, the sadness would catch up to you, afraid that if you stopped chasing, you'd have to face the emptiness, afraid that if you stopped pretending, you'd be seen, truly seen, and maybe not loved. Compulsion is never about the surface behavior. It's about the ache beneath it. The need we're trying to soothe without quite understanding. The hole we're trying to fill with movement, noise, control. But the more we run from that ache, the more it grows. The more we deny it, the more it rules us. What we won't face, we're doomed to repeat. So what do? We start by noticing. Noticing the way your hand reaches for your phone when silence falls. Noticing the way you tighten your voice when someone gets too close. Noticing the thoughts that loop in your head like broken records. Noticing not to fix, not to judge, but to see. Because awareness is the first breath of freedom. And once we notice, we can begin to ask gentle questions. What am I really needing right now? What am I afraid would happen if I stopped? Whose voice am I still obeying inside my head? These questions don't have quick answers. Sometimes they don't have answers at all. But even the act of asking them starts to loosen the grip. It opens a window, a little space between the pattern and the person. And in that space is choice. Maybe you still reach for the old habit, but now you know you're reaching. Maybe you still react the same way, but now you see the fear behind it. And that seeing changes everything. It's not about erasing who you've been. It's about softening into who you are beneath the reflex. Compulsion is not the enemy. It's a signal, a flare in the dark, saying something here needs care. And when you begin to care for it, not control it, not conquer it, just sit beside it with quiet understanding, it loses its urgency. The grip weakens. The loop slows down. You are not your patterns. You are not your compulsions. You are the one watching, the one remembering, the one whispering softly in the middle of the night. There must be another way. And there is. It may not come quickly. It may not come easily, but it begins in the silence, in the softness, in the courage to stop, even for a breath, and ask, is this still serving me, or is this just what I've always done? And then, maybe you do something different. Just once. Just a little. Just enough to feel the edge of the loop and step outside it. That's how freedom begins. Not in grand declarations, but in tiny acts of noticing. In choosing stillness when everything inside screams for motion. In offering yourself grace, even when you fall back into the old rhythm. Because it's not about perfection. It's about remembering that you can wake up again and again. And maybe, tonight, as the world quiets down and your thoughts begin their familiar dance, you'll sit beside them. not as their prisoner, but as their witness. You'll breathe and you'll notice, and in that noticing, you'll begin to remember. You are allowed to be more than what you've repeated. You are allowed to begin again. There is a quiet armor we wear. Most days, we don't even know it's there. It doesn't clang or shine like metal. It doesn't weigh us down like a shield might. It's made of glances turned away, of lips pressed tight, of words left unsaid. It's the way we flinch when someone gets too close, not always physically, but emotionally. It's the way our voice hardens just a little when we feel questioned, the way our hearts close ever so slightly when we sense we might be misunderstood. Defensiveness isn't loud, not always. It often tiptoes. It hides behind logic, behind smiles, behind a need to be right. And like so many hidden forces in us, it was born to protect, not to harm. You see, long before we learned to argue or retreat or raise our voice in a meeting, we learned something quieter, deeper, that the world could wound us. And it had. Somewhere back there, in a moment we remember too clearly, or maybe one we've forgotten entirely, we felt the sharp sting of being judged, misunderstood, dismissed, rejected, ridiculed for simply being who we were. And so the armor began to form. Not all at once, layer by layer, a sarcastic remark here, a shrug there, a small wall raised in response to a look that lingered too long, a hesitation before speaking a truth. Until one day, it's not something we put on, it's something we live inside. That's the strange thing about defensiveness. It doesn't feel like fear. It feels like control, like strength. It feels like keeping ourselves intact when someone threatens to shake the foundation. But if we listen closely, if we trace it back, there's always a softness underneath, a tender place we're afraid others might find and press against. And so when someone questions us about our words, our choices, even our intent, we don't hear curiosity. We hear danger, a threat, a challenge. And before we know it, our mind is building barricades, our chest tightens, our thoughts race, not toward truth, but toward protection. We say, "That's not what I meant," or "You're twisting my words." We defend not only what we said, but who we are, because in that moment, we aren't defending facts. We're defending our very sense of self, our story, our worth. But what if, just for a moment, we allowed ourselves to pause? What if instead of answering the moment with resistance, we met it with curiosity? Because most people aren't trying to hurt us. Most people are simply trying to make sense of the world through their own lens, just as we are. They might speak clumsily. They might not understand us right away, but their confusion is not an attack. Their opinion is not a verdict. And yet, when we live from a place of defensiveness, every question feels like a trial. Every conversation becomes a courtroom. We brace ourselves not to connect, but to win. The cost of this is high. We lose moments of intimacy, opportunities for growth. We shut down the parts of ourselves that long to be seen, truly seen, not as polished, perfect versions, but as whole, flawed, open-hearted beings. We trade truth for safety, connection for protection, and slowly, silently, we become islands. But you weren't meant to live behind walls. You weren't born to win arguments. You were made to feel, to learn, to unfold. And that can only happen when you allow yourself to be seen, not just in your strength, but in your uncertainty, your questions, your contradictions. It's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay to say, "I don't know," or "You might be right," or even, "That hurt me." That's not weakness. That's what courage looks like when it takes off the armor and stands quietly in its own skin. You'll still feel the impulse to defend. That's human. You'll feel the rise in your chest when someone touches a nerve. But you don't have to obey it. You can breathe through it. You can step back and ask, what am I protecting right now? And does it really need defending? Most of the time, the part of us that wants to lash out is the part that still believes love must be earned, that safety must be fought for. But what if you could offer that part of you something else? What if you could tell it softly, "You're safe here. You're already enough. You don't have to prove anything." In that stillness, something shifts. You begin to listen, not just to the words others say, but to the meanings behind them. You begin to respond, not from fear, but from understanding. You begin to speak, not to defend, but to share. And slowly, the armor grows lighter. You become more of yourself, not less. And people notice. They feel it in your presence, in the way your eyes soften instead of harden, in the way you make space instead of taking it. You don't have to protect who you are. Who you are does not need protecting. It needs loving. It needs remembering. It needs room to grow and room to stumble and room to be wrong without being cast away. So if tonight you feel that old tightening in your chest, that urge to correct, to prove, to pause, breathe. Let the silence hold you. Let your body know it is safe, even if someone disagrees. Let your soul rest in the truth that love isn't earned by being right. It comes to those who dare to be open. And in that openness, you'll find something gentler than victory. You'll find connection. You'll find understanding. And most of all, you'll find yourself, no longer hidden behind armor, but standing softly in the moonlight, unafraid of being known. Some wounds don't scream, they whisper, and some battles are fought not with others, but quietly, alone, behind the scenes of our own becoming. Have you ever stood on the edge of something good, really good, only to feel yourself pulling away, doubting, stalling, letting it slip like sand through your fingers? Maybe you didn't say the words you meant to say. Maybe you canceled the interview, ignored the call, closed the door on something you had longed for. And afterward, when the quiet returns and the moment is past, there's that familiar ache. The one that says, "Why did I do that?" The one that never really answers. This is self-sabotage, but not in the way we often imagine it, as some dramatic, reckless act of destruction. No, it's much softer than that, much quieter. It's the subtle ways we betray ourselves without fully realizing it. The tiny ways we chip at our own chances, because deep down, something inside us believes we don't deserve the good that's coming. It's strange, isn't it? That we could fear the very thing we want most, that we could run not from pain, but from joy. But there's a logic to it, an old emotional logic that was born in the shadows of our earliest experiences. Somewhere along the way, we learned that love could be lost, that praise could turn, that joy could vanish, that closeness could come with a cost. And so, our minds did something they thought would keep us safe. They began to expect the worst, to brace for the fall before the climb even began, to undermine our own hopes before someone else could do it for us. It's a kind of protection, really, a self-defense dressed up as failure. Because if you ruin something before it blooms, at least you won't have to watch it wither. But over time, this becomes a habit, a pattern. We stop showing up fully. We procrastinate, not because we're lazy, but because success feels foreign, even unsafe. We push people away, not because we don't care, but because we care so much it terrifies us. We hide behind perfectionism, behind distractions, behind humor, behind silence. Not because we're shallow, but because we are afraid of being truly seen. And this fear, it's rarely loud. It often sounds like logic. It sounds like, maybe now's not the right time. Or, what if I'm just not ready? Or, what if I mess it all up? But here's the quiet truth. Most of the time, we are not afraid of failure. We are afraid of being exposed. Afraid that if we try and still fall short, it will confirm the fear we've secretly held all along, that we are not enough. So we dance with self-sabotage, not because we are broken, but because somewhere inside, there is a younger version of us still trying to protect us from a pain we haven't yet named. If this sounds familiar to you, know this: you are not alone. We all carry versions of ourselves who are still learning how to trust joy, who are still waiting for proof that love won't leave, that good things can stay. And we don't need to shame these parts of ourselves. They are not the enemy. They are simply trying, in their own misdirected way, to keep us from harm. But we can begin to speak to them, gently, patiently, as you would to a scared child. We can say, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm not in danger anymore." We can say, "It's okay to want something. It's okay to receive it. It's okay to hope." Because every time we step past the impulse to sabotage, we are rewiring something ancient. We are telling our nervous system, our memories, our bones, you don't have to live in fear anymore. You are allowed to show up, to try, to get it wrong, to get it right. You are allowed to take up space in rooms you once shrank in, allowed to enjoy what you once pushed away. You are allowed to heal. The first step always is noticing the patterns, the ways you delay, the way you deflect compliments, the way you back out of things just before they get real. Noticing, without judgment, and then choosing differently. One small act of self-trust at a time. Sending the email, answering the call. Letting someone see the real you, even if your voice shakes. staying, even when it feels scary to stay. This isn't a straight line. Healing rarely is. You will still slip, still question, still find yourself on the edge of old habits. But with each choice to stay, to soften, to speak, you are telling the story differently. You are becoming someone who does not sabotage what they love, who does not flee when it matters most, someone who believes gently, steadily, that they are worthy of the very things they once feared. And maybe that belief won't be loud at first. Maybe it will be a whisper, a flicker. But even a whisper of worth is louder than a lifetime of silence. So tonight, if you feel yourself holding back, caught between the safety of the known and the trembling possibility of joy, pause, breathe. Remind yourself that it is not too late to change the ending, not too late to take one step forward, even if your feet are shaking. You are not your fear. You are not your past. You are not the moments you turned away from yourself. You are here, still becoming, still worthy, still allowed to try again. Let that be your soft rebellion. Let that be your beginning. There are stories we never tell, not to others, not even to ourselves. They live like forgotten letters at the bottom of an old drawer, faded and folded, sealed not with wax but with fear. You might go years without touching them. Sometimes you forget they're even there. But every now and then, something, a smell, a look, a song, brushes against them, and for a moment, the drawer creaks open. Repression is like that. It is not absence. It is not deletion. It is simply a turning away, a covering, a choice often made long ago to look in another direction because the truth felt too heavy to hold. And there is always a reason. No one represses for fun. We do it to survive what we once could not fully feel. A child who learns that crying brings shame may learn to laugh instead. A young heart that feels rejection may bury its longing beneath layers of strength. A soul that experiences trauma may lock the memory away, not because it doesn't matter, but because it matters too much. This law, the law of repression, moves in silence. It does not announce itself. It shows up in strange ways, in sudden anger that doesn't seem to fit the moment, in unexplained sadness at the edge of joy, in the recurring dream you keep forgetting by morning. Sometimes it looks like numbness, sometimes like perfectionism. Often it wears a smile. The thing about what we repress is this: it never really leaves. It waits, patiently, like a child at the edge of a playground hoping someone will notice, not to punish you, not to sabotage your peace, but to be known, to be held, to be allowed at long last to feel what it was never given permission to feel. There is so much we carry in silence, and sometimes we become so good at carrying it that we mistake the weight for part of who we are. We forget that the heaviness isn't us. It's what we've hidden, what we've learned to live without acknowledging. But our bodies remember, our nervous systems remember. And no matter how far we try to push it down, the repressed finds its way sometimes through illness, sometimes through anxiety, sometimes through a quiet, aching emptiness that we can't quite name. And this is not a failure. This is simply the truth asking gently to be seen. Maybe no one ever told you this, so let me say it clearly now. You are allowed to feel what you feel. You are allowed to grieve what you lost. You are allowed to rage over what was taken. You are allowed to remember, and in remembering, begin to release. But this is not a sprint. This is not a dramatic unveiling where everything is laid bare at once. No, healing is slower than that, softer. It often begins in small moments, a tear you don't wipe away, a memory you let come closer just for a second, a story you tell someone, even if your voice trembles. Sometimes repression teaches us that it's safer to forget, that forgetting keeps us functioning, keeps us moving. And maybe it did, for a time, but forgetting is not the same as healing. Numb is not the same as peace. Silence is not the same as freedom. To live fully, to love deeply, to rest without fear, you must make space for the things you once pushed away. And this doesn't mean reliving every pain. It means offering yourself the compassion to feel what you once couldn't, and to know that you are no longer alone with it. You are not weak for having buried things. You were strong for surviving them. And you are even stronger now for choosing to face them. I know it's scary. I know there's a part of you that wonders if opening that drawer might break something. But what if, instead, it frees something? What if you are not broken, but simply waiting to reconnect with the parts of you that have been exiled in the name of survival? Tonight, if you feel the weight of something unnamed pressing softly on your chest, don't rush to push it away. Sit with it. Listen. Maybe it is grief. Maybe it is a younger version of you still waiting to be heard. Maybe it is the truth, not trying to harm you, but trying to return. There is power in naming what hurts, power in giving shape to the things you once kept in the dark, power in saying, "This happened, it mattered, and I am still here." You are still here, and that means you are not defined by what you repressed. You are defined by the quiet courage it takes to remember with tenderness, to hold what was hard without turning away, to stay present, even as the old feelings rise like waves, and eventually those waves settle. They always do. But first, they must be allowed to crash, to speak, to wash over you without shame. You are not your pain. You are the space that holds it. You are the sky, not the storm. So tonight, as the world goes quiet and your mind begins to wander to old places, don't rush to distract yourself. Let the memories come. Let the feelings whisper. Let the drawer open, just a little. You are safe now, and you are strong enough to remember. This is how we reclaim what we lost. This is how we soften what hardened. This is how we come home. To feel is not to fall apart. It is to begin again. There's a certain kind of dream that doesn't arrive quietly. It enters like a storm, swelling the heart, filling the chest with electricity, making the impossible seem not only possible, but destined. It's that voice inside that says you were meant for something more, something extraordinary, something immortal. At first, it feels like a kind of magic. You walk a little taller. You imagine yourself above the crowd, called by fate to be different, special, larger than life. The ordinary rules no longer seem to apply. You were not born to be small. This longing for greatness, for glory, for recognition that transcends time is not wrong. It is deeply human. It's rooted in something primal, something ancient. We are the only species that builds monuments to itself, the only ones who write our names in stone, hoping the wind won't erase us. And yet, when this hunger goes unchecked, when the echo of more drowns out the voice of humility, something begins to twist. What once felt like vision becomes vanity. What once inspired begins to consume. That's the quiet threshold where grandiosity enters, not as a burst of light, but as a shadow cast by a light that burns too hot, too close. You might not even notice it at first. It's in the subtle ways we compare ourselves to others and always come out ahead. It's in the way we take more credit than is ours. It's in the way we seek admiration, applause, and validation like water in the desert. Never enough, never lasting. And maybe, somewhere deep down, there's still that trembling voice asking, if I'm not admired, do I even exist? Grandiosity is not confidence. It's not strength. It's not clarity of purpose. It's a mask, one that grows heavier the longer you wear it. Because behind it, there is almost always a quiet fear, a secret terror of being ordinary, of being unseen, of being enough. We live in a world that feeds this fear. Social media is a theater of illusions. We curate our lives, polish our reflections, and perform versions of ourselves that shimmer with the appearance of success. In such a world, who wouldn't want to stand out? Who wouldn't want to rise above the noise? But what we rarely admit is how lonely that ascent can be. When you build your worth on being exceptional, every flaw feels like failure. Every stumble feels fatal. You become trapped in the role of someone who must always be impressive, always admired, always larger than life. And the more people believe the image, the harder it becomes to admit how exhausted you are behind it. There is something deeply tragic about grandiosity, not because it's inherently wrong, but because it so often emerges from a wound, one we couldn't name, so we tried to outrun it. Some of the grandest personalities in history have also been the loneliest. The loudest voices sometimes are those who are most desperate to be heard. The ones who chase the biggest dreams are often trying to escape the smallest versions of themselves they were once told they'd always be. And yet, there's a tender truth beneath all of it. The desire to matter is sacred. The ache to be known, to be remembered, to leave something behind, it doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human. The danger comes only when you start believing that being human isn't enough, that the ordinary is something to escape rather than embrace. Because the truth is, some of the most powerful lives are not the loudest. Some of the deepest legacies are not measured in fame or fortune. They're measured in quiet kindnesses, in late-night conversations, in love given freely, without an audience. You don't have to be great in order to be good. You don't have to be worshipped to be worthy. You don't have to be exceptional to be enough. Sometimes, the grandest thing you can do is to let yourself be real. There is a freedom in this, a soft exhale after years of holding your breath. You are allowed to stop performing. You are allowed to sit down the crown. You are allowed to be seen, not for your image, not for your accolades, but for your heart. And perhaps that is the deepest longing hidden beneath all grandiosity, to be loved without condition. Not for the spotlight, not for the applause, but for who you are when the lights go out and no one's watching. Tonight, maybe you feel that old ache rise again, that quiet pressure to be more. Maybe you scroll through someone else's life and feel yourself shrinking in comparison. Maybe the dreams feel too big or your spirit feels too small. If so, let me remind you, you were never meant to be a monument. You are not a statue carved from marble. You are a living soul, soft and changing, full of light and shadow. And your worth was never tied to the size of your story, only to the honesty with which you live it. There is nothing wrong with dreaming big, but don't let the dream become a cage. Don't let the hunger for greatness steal the sweetness of being alive. Let yourself be quiet sometimes. Let yourself be small. Let yourself be human. And trust that in that softness, in that surrender, there is a kind of grandeur that no spotlight can match. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are not lost. You are simply finding your way back to the truth that you were always enough, even when no one noticed, even when no one clapped, even now. There's a certain silence that settles over the room when a child first realizes who they're supposed to be. Not who they are, but who the world expects them to become. It happens quietly, maybe in the voice of a parent gently correcting the way they sit, or in the subtle shift of a teacher's eyes when they choose what games are right for boys or girls. It's in the birthday gifts, the nicknames, the colors, the stories we're handed before we even know how to question them. The world hands us a script, pink or blue, soft or strong, giver or taker, and asks us to memorize it before we even understand the words. Gender, in this sense, is not just identity. It becomes choreography, a learned dance of posture and expression, of knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, of when tears are allowed and when they are seen as weakness. We are taught by implication, by repetition, by unspoken rules, how to perform the role we were assigned. And for a while, we try to follow along. We want to be good. We want to be accepted. We want to belong. But what happens when the dance doesn't fit the rhythm of your soul? What happens when the words you're told to say taste strange in your mouth? When the clothes feel like costumes? When the mirror shows you a face the world insists is something you're not? That's when the rigidity begins to press in like walls. There is a kind of quiet suffering in this, an ache that doesn't always have a name. For some, it's a constant tension between what they feel and what they're allowed to express. For others, it's a sharper pain, a daily act of hiding, of pretending, of editing oneself down to fit into someone else's idea of what's normal. And still others, even those who feel mostly aligned with the gender assigned to them, might feel an invisible pressure to overperform it, to harden themselves into caricatures in order to be believed. The law of gender rigidity does not whisper in our ears. It binds our hands. It says, you may not cry. You may not be too soft. You may not be too strong. You may not change. You may not question. You may not stray from the path drawn for you at birth. It's a law written not in ink, but in expectation. A law that cages both women and men, and everyone in between and beyond. Because while the boxes are shaped differently, they are all still boxes. And no spirit thrives in confinement. In the quiet hours, when the world has stopped asking us to perform, we might start to remember the person we were before the roles were assigned. Maybe you remember being 5 years old and loving something the world said you shouldn't. Maybe you remember how quickly shame was attached to joy. Maybe you were told, in 1,000 small ways, that your instincts were wrong, that your body betrayed you, that your softness made you weak, or your strength made you dangerous. And yet, even in the midst of all that unlearning, some part of you survived. A thread of truth, humming quietly beneath the weight of years. It whispers, you were never meant to be split in two. You were never meant to wear a mask to feel safe. You were never broken, only bent around the shape of a culture that couldn't see you clearly. There is no one way to be a man, no single blueprint for being a woman, and there are far more than two ways to exist in this world. But for so long, we've feared that freedom. We've treated it like a threat rather than a truth. Sometimes, the ones who cling the hardest to gender rigidity are the ones who feel most lost without it. Because if the roles are flexible, then the safety net disappears. And in its place, we're left with something far more terrifying: choice. Choice is a kind of wilderness, and the heart, if it's never been allowed to wander, might tremble in its presence. But still, we wander. And in that wandering, we begin to discover that gender, at its most sacred, isn't about rules or roles or restrictions. It's about expression, about resonance, about finding a way to walk through the world that feels true to the shape of your inner life. It's about allowing softness to coexist with strength, about letting tenderness live inside courage, about seeing beauty not in conformity, but in complexity. You don't have to have the answers. You don't have to know the perfect words. You don't have to fit in someone's box or explain yourself to people who haven't learned to listen. All you have to do is come home to yourself. That is a kind of bravery the world doesn't always recognize, but desperately needs. Tonight, as you listen, maybe you feel the sting of old rules. Maybe you remember the ways you were told who you could be and who you couldn't. Maybe you still carry some of those voices inside you. That's okay. You don't need to silence them. Just don't let them steer. Let yourself be soft. Let yourself be vast. Let yourself unfold in directions no one ever imagined. You are not a performance. You are not a costume. You are not a mistake. You are a story still being written, and your gender, whatever it may look like, however it may change, is not a prison. It is a poem, one only you can write, one that doesn't need to rhyme with anyone else's. Let it be strange. Let it be holy. Let it be yours. There are moments in life when it feels like the map has been taken from your hands, not torn, not stolen, just gently slipped away, like fog swallowing a path you were so sure of just moments before. And suddenly, you are standing in the middle of a life you don't quite recognize, trying to remember why you began walking in the first place. It's strange how quiet it can be, this kind of drifting. You don't always realize it's happening at first. The days still unfold as they always do. Morning light, tired steps, polite conversations, routines worn smooth from repetition. But something begins to go missing beneath the surface. A pulse, a pull. That quiet thread that once gave your life a shape, a direction, a reason. And in its place grows a certain stillness. Not the kind that soothes, but the kind that numbs. The law of aimlessness isn't about laziness. It's not about people who don't care or don't try or don't dream. It's about something deeper, more difficult to name. It's about a soul that has been untethered from its own longing. A spirit that, somewhere along the way, stopped believing that its direction mattered. Maybe it was disappointment. Maybe it was failure. Maybe it was the subtle erosion of hope over time, like water slowly carving away the rock. Or maybe it was simply the noise, the endless noise of a world demanding productivity, success, milestones, until the pursuit itself became mechanical, until even the dreams felt prepackaged and hollow. There is a particular ache that comes from being lost while everyone around you seems certain. They talk of goals and 5-year plans, of passions and purpose, and you smile, nodding, pretending. But inside, there is only the fog. You scroll through options, paths, lives you could try on, but none seem to fit. And so you drift, not because you want to, but because you no longer know how not to. And sometimes the worst part is that no one notices. You become an expert at camouflage. You laugh when you're supposed to, you show up, you answer emails, you play the part. But inside, there is a gentle unraveling, a sense that you are wandering through your own story as a stranger. There is no shame in this. Let me say that again. There is no shame in this. We are taught to believe that our lives must always have a clear arc, that we must be climbing, achieving, chasing something, that aimlessness is a kind of failure. But what if it's not? What if it is simply a season of waiting, a pause, a sacred intermission? You see, even the stars go dark during the day. Even the tide pulls back before it returns. Even seeds must be buried in silence before they bloom. Sometimes, the lack of direction is not a problem to solve, but a message to receive. Perhaps your soul is asking you to stop sprinting, to stop grasping, to sit down in the middle of the fog and simply breathe. To listen, not for a plan, not for a perfect answer, but for the soft rhythm of your own becoming. Because beneath the aimlessness, beneath the wandering, there is still something alive in you, a quiet ember waiting. It may not know where it wants to go, but it knows what it longs to feel. Connection, meaning, wonder. To wake up in the morning and feel like your existence is not just repetition, but revelation. So maybe you start there, not with a map, but with a question. What makes you feel most alive? Not what impresses others, not what checks the boxes, not what makes money or wins praise or sounds good at dinner parties. Just what stirs something inside you. What makes your chest ache with recognition? What makes time disappear? That is the beginning of direction. Not a career, not a mission, but a compass of the heart. And yes, it may take time. You may wander longer than you'd like. You may doubt yourself 100 times, but in that wandering, you begin to shed the weight of false goals. You begin to see more clearly. You begin to realize that maybe the point was never to arrive, but to feel your way back to yourself. Tonight, if you feel lost, if you feel numb, if you feel like everyone else has a why and you're still searching for yours, please know this. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not alone. You are simply in a season that asks for patience. A chapter that doesn't rush to the plot twist. Let yourself float, just for a while. Let yourself meander. Let yourself rest without performance. Let the silence speak to you. Let the ache teach you where you're not meant to be. And when you're ready, when the ember begins to glow a little brighter, you will rise. Not with a rigid plan, but with a deeper knowing. A more honest voice. A direction that feels like home. Aimlessness is not the end. It's the threshold before the beginning. It happens so quietly that most of us never notice. Not all at once, not like a dramatic transformation in a film. No, it's far more subtle than that. A nod here, a compromise there, a smile that hides disagreement, a silence where once there would have been protest. And slowly, like water dripping on stone, we are shaped. We begin as ourselves, raw, odd, vivid in our uniqueness. Children with strange questions and stubborn dreams. We draw dragons on math homework and laugh too loudly at things adults don't find funny. We want to become astronauts, magicians, explorers of imaginary worlds. There is no filter, no shame, no need to shrink or apologize. But then the world begins to whisper. It tells us how to behave, what is acceptable, what is admired, what is normal. And piece by piece, we begin to mold ourselves into that shape. Not because we are weak, not because we want to lie, but because we are human, and humans long to belong. The law of conformity is not inherently cruel. In many ways, it is a survival instinct, an ancient tribal wisdom that taught us it's safer in the group, that standing out could mean exile, that to be too different is to be alone. So we learn to read the room, to adapt, to smooth the edges of who we are. But somewhere along the way, a soft erosion takes place. We lose the sound of our own voice. We stop asking what we think. We begin to echo the opinions of those around us, not out of malice or deception, but out of habit. It's easier. It causes less friction. And the world rewards it, smiles wider, accepts us more quickly when we align with the expected. We dress a certain way, speak in certain tones, adopt the beliefs of the group, not because they are true to us, but because they are comfortable, predictable, safe. And yet, something inside begins to ache. Maybe you felt it, that small pulse of restlessness, that quiet question, is this really me? It often arrives in the quiet hours when the day's noise settles and you are alone with yourself. It doesn't accuse or shout, it just lingers. A flicker of doubt, a tug towards something forgotten, a memory of a self you buried to fit the shape of the room. The tragedy of conformity is not that it exists, it's that it can become invisible. We forget we're wearing a mask. We forget that there was ever anything underneath it. We become so good at the performance that even we start to believe it. And the longer we stay there, the harder it becomes to return. You might look around and wonder what happened to the dreamer in you, the rebel, the misfit, the one who used to feel alive doing strange, beautiful things that no one else understood. That person may now feel distant, like a character from another life. But I promise you, they are not gone. Only quiet, still there, still waiting. Sometimes conformity comes not from fear, but from weariness. It's exhausting to be misunderstood, to swim against the current, to explain yourself again and again. And so we surrender, not because we are defeated, but because we are tired. But my dear friend, please don't stay there too long. The world may love the version of you that conforms, but it needs the version of you that does not. It needs the strange art you've hidden, the truths you're afraid to speak, the questions you still carry. It needs your honest laughter, your stubborn wonder, your refusal to become just another echo in the crowd. Because every time someone dares to be real, they light a path for others to do the same. You don't need to become loud or confrontational to reclaim yourself. You don't have to break things. Sometimes the most radical act is simply to return to your own thoughts, your own desires, your own rhythm, to wear what feels like you, to say no when your body tightens, to say yes when your soul leans forward, to remember that belonging is not about becoming like everyone else. It's about being seen as you truly are and still being loved. And that kind of belonging, it begins with you, with the quiet decision to take off the mask, even if only in small moments, to speak the truth of your heart in whispers until one day you can sing it out loud. Tonight, as the world sleeps and all its expectations loosen their grip, I invite you to remember who you were before you became what the world asked of you. Not to judge yourself, not to feel ashamed, but to offer kindness to the parts of you that still wait in the dark, the parts that once dreamed with abandon, the parts that still long to be free. There is no rush, no test to pass, just this gentle promise. You are allowed to return to yourself, even if it takes time, even if you're scared, even if you don't know what that self looks like yet. You are allowed to be different. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to choose your own way, even if no one else understands it. Because the most beautiful things in this world have always begun as a refusal. People change, that much is certain, but it's the how and the when that often catch us off guard. One day they hold you with warmth, and the next, their eyes don't quite meet yours the same way. You replay old conversations, trying to find the moment the light began to fade. But sometimes there isn't one. Sometimes hearts shift like clouds in the sky, quietly, without warning. This is the law no one wants to accept. Human affection is unstable, fleeting. It dances to its own rhythm, often out of sync with our expectations. And it hurts, doesn't it? The way someone can be so present, so tender, so intertwined with your soul, then grow distant, almost indifferent, as though they were never there at all. We tend to take it personally. How could we not? When someone pulls away, it feels like a reflection of our worth. Were we not enough? Did we do something wrong? But more often than not, their distance isn't about us. It's about them, their tides, their storms, their hidden inner maps we were never meant to read. Sometimes people don't even know why they're pulling away. They just feel it, a cooling, a weight, a silence that grows too loud to ignore. The human heart is not a still lake, it's a weather system, temperamental, moved by unseen currents. And what someone swears today with fire in their chest, they may whisper away tomorrow with barely a trace of guilt. It's not that their feelings were false. It's that feelings by nature are fickle. They rise and fall, often without our permission. We crave constancy. We want the story to stay the same. We want the friend who once made us laugh at midnight to still feel like home. We want the lover who once held our hand like it was the whole world to never stop reaching. But the story shifts, and no one teaches us how to grieve the living, those who are still here, just not here with us anymore. There's a particular kind of sorrow in that, the quiet ache of watching someone fade, not from the earth, but from your life. You see their name in a message thread you haven't opened in months. You hear a song and remember how they used to hum it under their breath. And for a moment, the past feels so close, you almost believe you could step back into it. But when you try, it's never quite the same. Something has changed, and you can't name it, only feel it. The law of fickleness teaches us that no connection is guaranteed to last in its original form. It doesn't mean love is a lie. It means love is alive, growing, shifting, sometimes dissolving when it no longer fits the shape of the people involved. We outgrow people. They outgrow us. Sometimes we circle back, sometimes we don't. And in the silence that follows a departure, there's a temptation to harden, to decide it's better not to care, to build a wall so no one can enter and no one can leave. But oh, what a lonely fortress that becomes. To avoid pain by avoiding love is to trade one ache for another, a colder, quieter one. Instead, we might learn to hold people more gently, to stop clutching at them like lifelines and start meeting them like waves. Beautiful, temporary, alive in this moment. And that moment is enough. We can love without expecting permanence. We can savor without possessing. We can offer our full presence, knowing they may not always stay, but we stayed, fully, while they were here. Of course, this doesn't mean we shouldn't grieve the loss. Even if it's subtle, even if they didn't die, only drifted, the loss is real, and you're allowed to feel it. To sit with the emptiness they left behind, not to fill it too quickly, but to honor what was once there. You can cry over someone who isn't gone. You can miss the old version of a person who still walks the earth, but no longer walks with you. What's strange is that sometimes you are the one who changes. One day you wake up and realize you don't feel the same about a person, a dream, a place, and you don't understand it. You try to force the old feeling back, but it doesn't fit anymore. You've grown into a new skin, and the room you once called home now feels too small. We are all both victims and vessels of fickleness. It is not cruelty, it is not betrayal, it is the quiet truth of being alive, that we are shaped by time, mood, experience, even sleep, that who we were yesterday is not always who we are today, and that loving someone includes letting them be that changeable creature, even if it hurts. Still, there's a strange beauty in it all, because if nothing is guaranteed to last, then everything becomes more precious. Every moment, every conversation, every shared silence under the stars, you stop waiting for forever and begin to cherish right now. You pour your love fully into this fragile moment because you know it won't come again in quite the same way. And when the inevitable distance comes, you do not chase, you do not beg, you simply bow to the law. You feel the sorrow, yes, but you also feel gratitude, that for a time you shared something real, that for a time you saw someone and were seen. So tonight, if someone is drifting from you, or if you are drifting from someone, know that you are not broken. You are human, living under the rhythm of a law older than any of us. Hold space for the tenderness, even in the letting go. And remember, what is meant to stay will stay, and what is meant to pass through will do so with grace, if you let it. Let them go softly, and hold yourself always with kindness. If you listen closely, beyond the noise of opinions and trends, through the endless scroll of updates and outrage, there's a quiet echo that travels through time. It's the whisper of generations past, not in their words, but in their mistakes. You see, every generation carries a peculiar illusion, the belief that this time we've figured it out, that our era is the wisest, the most enlightened, the most advanced humanity has ever been. It's a comforting thought, especially when we compare ourselves to the errors of those who came before, wars they waged, injustices they accepted, superstitions they embraced. We nod with a kind of moral superiority, don't we? As though the arc of history has finally curved into our hands. But hidden behind that self-assurance is a blindness, a short-sightedness that each generation inherits like an invisible gene. We become so absorbed in the now, in our own moment, that we lose sight of the larger pattern. It starts innocently enough. We grow up under the rules and rhythms of our age. We learn what is praised, what is shamed, what is expected. These become our truths, not because we chose them, but because they're all we've ever known. And slowly, without even realizing it, we begin to believe that these truths are universal. But they're not. They're stitched from the fabric of their time, woven by economic pressures, cultural shifts, and historical trauma. They feel solid, but they are made of sand. Look back, not with judgment, but with gentleness. There was a time when burning books seemed noble, when the earth was believed to be flat, when people were bought and sold as property, and all of it felt normal. Not because people were evil, but because they lived within the blindness of their time. Their culture trained them to see the world in a certain way. And that training, like any well-learned role, is hard to break. Now, pause. Take a deep breath. Ask gently, what if we are doing the same thing right now? What if the values we cling to today, our idols, our certainties, our institutions, will one day look as foolish, as cruel, or as naive to future eyes as those of the past look to us now? What if the way we consume the earth, the way we treat time, attention, or love, what if these too are just temporary habits, masquerading as truth? It's not easy to imagine. The present feels so immediate, so loud, so self-evident. We surround ourselves with people who believe what we believe. Our devices feed us the same thoughts dressed in different words. And soon, we forget that we're even inside something, that we're swimming in water we cannot see. That is generational myopia. It's the inability to see beyond the horizon of our own era, a kind of collective tunnel vision. And like all tunnel vision, it feels safe. It gives us the illusion of control, but it also imprisons us. It makes it harder to ask big questions, harder to dream differently, harder to imagine a world not built in our image. The most tragic part? This blindness often disguises itself as progress. We assume we are moving forward because technology advances. We build faster machines, smarter algorithms, better tools. But progress in tools doesn't always mean progress in soul. A society can grow more efficient and more empty at the same time. Sometimes I wonder, if someone from 100 years in the future could speak to us now, what would they say? Would they marvel at our digital world, or would they grieve it? Would they see our obsession with productivity, our loneliness masked as connection, our endless chase for more, and call it growth? Or would they see a species lost in a maze of its own making? We don't know. We can't. That's the weight of being alive in the present. We are both the authors and the characters, writing the story even as we live it. But we can remember that this story is not the only one. When you begin to feel overwhelmed by the noise of your time, when the urgency of the now feels too sharp, step back. Tilt your gaze outward. Imagine you are standing far above the timeline of humanity, watching it unfold not in decades but in centuries. From up there, you can see the rise and fall of empires, the slow change of values, the way every generation thought it had found the answer, and how each one inevitably was wrong about something crucial. That perspective is humbling, but also freeing. It reminds us that we don't have to grip the present so tightly, that it's okay to question what everyone else seems so sure about. That doubt, when held with grace, can be a kind of wisdom. You are not obligated to inherit the blindness of your age. You can notice it, you can name it, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you can even step outside of it, if only for a moment. That moment is precious. It's the moment when you stop playing the part written for you and begin to write something else. It's when you stop asking, "What should I believe?" and start asking, "What might I be missing?" The law of generational myopia is not a curse, it's a mirror. One that invites us to look more softly, to listen more deeply, to wonder more courageously. And maybe, just maybe, if enough of us learn to see the water we're swimming in, we can begin to imagine an ocean wide enough for all of us. Not just now, but long after we're gone. Now rest if you can. Let the world soften its edges. You're not meant to carry the weight of history on your shoulders, only to whisper to it now and then, like a leaf to the wind. I see you. I remember. I am trying to see more clearly. Tomorrow the world will still be here. But tonight, let it all go. Let the silence hold you. And in that stillness, maybe you'll begin to hear something older than any generation, something deeper than any trend. Your own voice, the one untouched by time. There's a quiet truth we all carry but rarely speak of. It hums beneath our distractions, shadows our joys, and lingers just behind the laughter at dinner tables. Deep within, we all know that we will die. And yet, strangely, perhaps even masterfully, we spend most of our lives pretending otherwise. Death is the only certainty we're given, and still, it's the one we flee from the most. Not with loud, frantic steps. No, most of the time it's a gentle turning away. A glance diverted, a sudden change of topic, a soft promise. Let's not think about that now. And in doing so, we construct a life upon a kind of beautiful forgetting. It begins in childhood. Children live as though time is infinite, as if the days stretch endlessly across a sunlit meadow. There's no urgency, no reckoning. And that's the gift of childhood, being allowed to drift in a dream that doesn't demand goodbyes. But as we grow, that dream begins to fray. We lose people. A grandparent, a distant relative, a friend, then someone closer. The meadow narrows, the sun shifts, the shadows grow longer. Still, we resist awareness. The modern world aids us. We've learned to sanitize death, hide it in hospital rooms, conceal it behind curtains, soften it with euphemisms. We say someone passed away, went to a better place, or is no longer with us. Funerals become celebrations of life. We send flowers, wear black. But rarely do we sit with death in its raw form. Rarely do we let it speak. Denial becomes a kind of armor. It keeps us moving, productive, entertained, busy. It's easier to scroll than to reflect. Easier to make 5-year plans than to face the trembling truth that we may not have 5 more minutes. But what we deny only grows stronger in the dark. Like a wave held back too long, it eventually crashes, harder, heavier. There's something deeply human about this denial. It's not cowardice. It's fear dressed in grace. It's the mind shielding the heart. Because to truly grasp our mortality is to open a door to an ache that language can barely contain. Yet in turning away, we lose something precious. We lose presence. When death feels distant, life grows dull. When we forget our impermanence, we forget the warmth of morning sunlight, the power of a single conversation to shape our soul. We forget how sacred it is to hold a hand, to hear a laugh echo through the hallway, to say goodbye, not as a routine, but as a blessing. To live as though we will not die is to live asleep. But here lies the paradox. When we stop running from death, when we allow its presence not in panic but in quiet acknowledgement, it changes us. Not into grim or morbid people, but into softer ones. More tender, more awake. A person who walks beside death does not waste time. They don't cling to grudges. They speak the words that matter. They forgive. They dare to be vulnerable. They stop postponing the life they were meant to live. In some ancient cultures, there is a meditative ritual to imagine one's own death, not to frighten, but to remember, to envision the last breath, the stillness, the silence, and then to return to life with a clarity so sharp it almost hurts. Food tastes richer. Music feels deeper. Love becomes less of a game, more of a home. It doesn't take grand acts. Sometimes it's as simple as looking at the sky and knowing one day you won't, or holding someone a moment longer, or lighting a candle and watching the flame flicker, understanding how fragile even fire can be. This law, the law of death denial, is not something to condemn. It is a mirror. We all carry it, and perhaps we always will. But maybe tonight, in this quiet hour, we can choose to turn toward the truth instead of away. Not to be afraid, but to be fully, vividly alive. Because in the end, death is not the enemy of life. It is its frame, its boundary, its sacred edge. Without it, nothing would matter. With it, everything does. So sleep tonight knowing this. Your life is a single flame in a vast, dark world. And because it will one day flicker out, it burns all the more beautifully now. Let that soften you. Let that wake you. Let that be enough.